Bush. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good morning and welcome back as we continue to honor America's 41st President, George H.W. Bush. There you see the motorcade, the hearse carrying his casket, which has just pulled into Ellington Air Force Field in Houston, Texas. About a 45-minute drive from his home, accompanied by family members, met by a military honor guard at Ellington Air Force Base in front of Air Force One, which has been sent by President Trump, retitled Special Air Mission 41 in honor of our 41st president for his final journey to the U.S. Capitol, where later today he will lie in state in the U.S. Capitol celebration with the leadership of Congress Vice President Mike Pence and his family ahead of a state funeral at Washington's National Cathedral on Wednesday. Of course, all of these honors meticulously planned with the participation of President Bush himself. He will be met there by General Michael Howard, who's the commanding general of Washington, D.C., in charge of all funeral preparations, and an honor guard that you see there representing every branch of the military service. Also there to escort his father, America's 43rd president, George W. Bush. Cokie Roberts, every moment of these rituals meticulously planned.
By the military. That is what happens with a presidential funeral, and they're planned often. What happened with President Bush, for instance, is that some of the people he had originally planned to eulogize him have died, and he has had to redo his plans. But you know, George, thinking about these days of respect and remembrance, which we'll be having this week, I'm struck with the tributes that have come in over the weekend by the thousands, how specific they are. It's not, we mourn your loss. It's from the NIH. He did the Human Genome Project. From the CIA, he reconstituted the agency and brought back its reputation. From individuals, one after another, acts of personal kindness. It's really something to see.
And there we see the honor guard going to meet the casket. Not only institutional remembrance, Cokie Roberts, but also such personal remembrance for President George Bush. It's been said so many times that he represents another era, an era when people used to write letters, and he wrote them by the thousands.
And they're quite personal. His letters to his mother, for instance, really say things that you don't expect young men to tell their mothers, but he did. And if you had any interaction with him, you would get a note. He wrote to me when my mother died, for instance, a very lovely note. He was very well brought up.
President's family, President George W. Bush, Neil Bush, their children and grandchildren, and Major General Michael Howard of the Military District of Washington, D.C. Alfonso flourishes Hail to the Chief, the U.S. Navy hymn, and a 21-gun salute for America's 41st president. Now on Special Air Mission 41 for that flight from Houston, Texas, Ellington Air Force Field to Washington, D.C. and the U.S. Capitol, where President George H.W. Bush will lie in state later today. You see his family there. President George W. Bush, his son Neil Bush, children and grandchildren. And they'll go onto the plane now as well. And Terry Moran, so appropriate that the president ushered out with the naval hymn. I want to also show a tweet that was sent out by his office earlier today. With his final rest, he will wear some socks, some special socks, which pay homage to his time as a fighter pilot, shot down at the age of 20 in World War II. And Terry, he said that was the defining experience of his life.
He did, and he was asked, of all the high positions that he held in public service, vice president, head of the CIA, envoy to China, congressman, what prepared him the best to be president of the United States? And he said that day in September 1945, when he was shot out of the sky, he had been tested, and he also had come to understand, in a way very few people do, the value of human life. He would say sometimes in talking about that, I'm no hero. And one can't help but see with the passing of George Herbert Walker Bush, the passing of a certain ideal of American manhood, the strong, silent type, brave, even lethal if necessary, but not a braggart or not any kind of person, certainly not this person, George Herbert Walker Bush, to brag on something, an act of heroism like that. That
was not the man he was. You see his son, George W., climbing onto Special Air Mission. Of course, there is his service dog, Sully, by his side for so many years. Will now be returning to Washington, D.C. and stay in service for other veterans of the war. Cokie Roberts.
At Walter Reed Hospital, Walter Reed, the original hospital and Navy, have combined to one facility called Walter Reed, and it's filled with military wounded warriors. And so to have Sully go on to be helpful to them is so incredibly appropriate and so typical of the Bush family to do this, to say, because I've met the dog, he's a very sweet dog, so it's hard to say goodbye, but the dog should be a service dog.
And will be. There you see this weekend, laying before the casket. The president also got a farewell just moments ago from the U.S. Navy. Fair winds and following seas, sir. We have the watch. Approximately a 3-hour flight from Houston, Texas, on to Washington, D.C. Later this afternoon, as we said, the president will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. There will be a ceremony at the Capitol Rotunda. Mary Bruce, our chief congressional correspondent, is there. Mary.
George, members of the armed services are starting to line up here in front of the Capitol for the ceremony to come here this afternoon. The Capitol preparing to honor President Bush, welcome him back to the Capitol for the final time. This, of course, is the place where his political career began. He served 2 terms here in the House of Representatives, and today he will be celebrated and honored by members of his former cabinet, his former colleagues. Of course, his vice president, Dan Quayle, will be present, his dear friend, former Secretary of State James Baker as well. And we will hear directly from members of Congress, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the House Speaker Paul Ryan, and the Vice President Mike Pence, also the only member of the White House to speak out here today. The president, of course, is not present here for this ceremony, though he is slated to attend the funeral on Wednesday at the National Cathedral. And George, President Bush is being remembered on both sides of the aisle as a leader who was dignified, gracious, restrained, and resolute. And you get a sense from leaders on both sides of the aisle that they are mourning not just the loss of this tremendous statesman, but the loss of a real political era, that he is being remembered as someone who embodied bipartisanship, something that is in such short supply up here these days, George.
No question about that. We'll see what lessons Washington takes away as we honor the president in these final days. And of course, Cokie Roberts, the president, began his political career in the Congress.
In the House of Representatives, representing this district that he's leaving right now. So he's made this trip many times. But it was only 2 terms, but it propelled him into other elective office and public service. And really, his entire life dedicated to public service. But the Congress remained a place that, even though it frustrated him when he was president, he liked the Congress. He respected the institution. And he went to the Hill and met with members of both sides and had a good time with them. He enjoyed the give and take with members of Congress.
The Honor Guard now leaving the field at Ellington Air Force Base. Amy, quite a moment there.
It certainly was, George. We've been watching from the risers here. So many members of the media gathered to watch those who loved President H.W. Bush make this final departure to D.C. We, out of respect, were quiet during the entire departure ceremony, which had been very rehearsed for many, many weeks, and especially in the days leading up to this final departure, to make sure everything was just as planned. And you saw there the Joint Honor Military Guard as the pallbearers taking the casket of George H.W. Bush onto the plane of Air Force One, which has been aptly renamed for today, Special Air Mission 41. And so now you saw members of the Bush family getting on that plane as well. So many other friends and guests invited here on the tarmac on this windy, brisk day here in Houston, also to pay their respects to the hearse and to the casket as it makes its way to the nation's capital. And of course, you hear there the Honor Guard beating the drum as they walk off the tarmac, but it really was a very poignant moment here. The 21-gun salute, hail to the chief, and you could see the deep respect among everyone here as they watched the casket of H.W. Bush be led onto Air Force One right now. Of course, President Trump allowing Air Force One to come here from Argentina to make this final trip to D.C., where, of course, we know President Bush will be lying in state, and then the state funeral there at the nation's cathedral. He will come back here to his adopted home state of Texas. He will be laid to rest in College Station next to his dear wife Barbara, who passed just a few months ago, and of course his daughter Robin, who died at the age of 3 from leukemia. So he will be laid to rest with them here on Thursday. In the meantime, Houstonians here paying their respects to the man that they certainly loved and admired. There will be a music festival tonight at City Hall with some of his favorite acts, the Gatlin Brothers, among those who will be performing tonight in honor of President Bush. And of course, everyone awaiting his return here to Texas Wednesday evening for his Thursday burial, George.
Texas is the home he chose, and that's where we have his final resting now. He heads on his final flight to Washington, D.C., to the United States Capitol. We will be back later this afternoon for that service to the Capitol Rotunda, approximately 5 p.m. Eastern, about 4:45. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News. We now join our programming in progress.
levantarse. A ver. Ah, no, pero tiene que como quiera va a pasar. Sí, sí, sí. No puedo porque estamos enfrente.